Welcome to Just Wanna Quilt, a research podcast coming out of Tulane University Law School, where we explore all kinds of things, stories about quilting, tools, field trips, maybe some famous quilters stop by, and, of course, a little bit of copyright thrown in just for fun. I'm Elizabeth Townsend Gard. I'm a law professor at Tulane University Law School, and I just wanna quilt. Today we're talking to Gigi Baay. She is part of our Quilting Army. She is fabulous. She works at Uptown Needle and Craftworks here on Magazine in New Orleans. And she is amazing. She makes you feel like you can do anything. I made 3 jackets with her help, and I didn't know how to do making jacket things. She's awesome. She's been sewing all her life. She's a quilter. She's so much fun. I hope you enjoy it.
All right, so tell me who you are and where are we?
My name is Gigi Baay, and we are upstairs in my sewing studio.
And we're in New Orleans.
We're in New Orleans, Louisiana, yes.
And that's me. And it's one of the first, winter's finally arrived, right?
Yes, it's been really chilly.
Which for us is 30s and 40s.
Right.
Okay.
Well, we did have snow. Some people, I had ice, but other people had snow.
Yeah, I know. It was really awesome. All the children went outside for 10 seconds.
Right. That's what my grandson said. They went out twice. And then the teacher said, okay, if it happens again, we're not going back out. I think it was mostly wet. It wasn't really.
It was just sludge.
Yeah.
Funny. All right. So we're going to talk about your quilting life. But I first want to talk about, first how we met. So you work at
Uptown Needle and Craftworks on Magazine Street in New Orleans.
And one of the cool things about it is you have an open session where if you're working on something, you can just come and get help and just sew. And so I showed up one day.
We call it sit and sew.
And sew. And it's great because a lot of places have it, but they actually charge people to do it. Really expensive in New York, $45 or something to come sew or something. It's ridiculous. Anyway, so I came and you were magical.
You conquered it. You conquered what you were doing.
So I was trying to make, so I only quilt. I don't sew. And you sew. We'll talk lots about your life. But you helped me make 3 very intricate, ridiculous jackets as cosplay for my daughter and her friends.
They were amazing.
And a bond was formed. I just couldn't believe that I could do it. And you were so encouraging. And I know you've taught sewing for a long time, but there's a skill to it, and it's an art, and not everybody can do it. And I got everything in, the zippers and the sleeves and everything.
It was zippers?
And zippers.
That was quite exciting.
Really good. Yes,
so I think the sleeves were the most exciting part.
Yeah, because it was really hard. They were really hard. So anyway, so that's where we met, and then we had lots of time to chat. And so let's start with the way we start with every interview, which is, what's your first memory of sewing?
My mom has always sewn, and in our house in Shreveport, where I was born, she had a little closet under the stairs. You know how the stairs slant? She had a little closet in there that is where she sewed. And she made all kind of beautiful things. And she would let me sit in there and touch everything and play. And she never, ever fussed. And I think that's why I grew up loving it. Because I've taught many people who say, I would love to sew, but I got yelled at when I did this. Or I would love to sew, but my mom always corrected me and I had to do it over again. And she never did that. It was always, okay, that's perfect, just the way it is.
And that's the way you are when you teach. It's really interesting.
And so, because you have to have fun with it. Otherwise, what's the point?
Yeah.
If it's not fun.
And did she quilt at all? Or did
she does now.
Yeah, she does now.
She didn't. She was clothing. She would look at things, in a Neiman Marcus catalog, and she's like, "Oh, that's a dress," and then she would make that dress, and so she did mostly clothing. Oh, do I have it in here? Where is she? Bertha. Oh, is that Bertha? I've got to find Bertha for you, because Bertha she took a class in the 60s, and they made my mom's form the actual form.
Oh, really?
And it was my size until I had kids. And then, now you can see Bertha has fabric just laying all over her now.
That's really great. I love it.
So we love Bertha. We've never get rid of Bertha. But, so Mom would just put stuff on there and create these incredible garments. And people always, she just looked great. And she just passed it on.
That's amazing. What do you think the difference is between sewing and quilting? Like making clothing and quilting? Do you think it's a different thing?
It is a totally different thing. Sewing, if you're making clothing, it has to be precise. Not that quilting doesn't, but sewing, you can't have buckles and bumps, and you can't stack and whack. If you whack it off, it's not going to fit. And I quilt more of a stack and whack kind of thing. Like, oh, it's a little long. Oh, I just cut that off. But sewing is, it's gratifying in that, when you make something that fits and you can wear it, it really feels good. But it also can be, for me, very frustrating when it doesn't fit, when it doesn't come out exactly right. The fabric doesn't drape the way you thought it was going to. You see Project Runway. It's it's exactly like that. Yeah. You have a vision in your head, and you come home and you cut everything out, and there's my trash pile of the dress that didn't work. Sometimes it just doesn't work.
Yeah.
And when it doesn't work in quilting, I never get discouraged. I just add more fabric, or I just change the pattern. But if it doesn't work in sewing, I fold it up and I put it in a pile, and I usually leave it, and then it'll grow into being something else, like a doll dress for Sarah or something else.
Yeah.
But it's quilting, I never feel like I make a mistake. I just change what I was doing.
That's really interesting.
I don't know. That's how.
So when did you start sewing? And when did you start quilting?
I started sewing when I was probably about 6. And I got one of these machines that I tell everybody not to buy, but my mom got me one for Christmas. I think I was 5 or 6. And it actually moved and pulled the fabric through. And so I really thought I was sewing. I don't remember it making stitches, but it moved it, and I thought I was sewing. Then the bicentennial year, which was 1976, I was in 6th grade, and we had a competition at school. Everybody had to do something that was handmade. And you could make jelly, you could do whatever you wanted to do, but it had to be something kind of like what they would have done in colonial times, I suppose. How would they? So I made a quilt. And that was my first quilting project. And I did applique on it, and I loved it. It was not perfect. It was bumpy and lumpy, but I loved it. And I got 2nd place. And that was the beginning. I've never entered anything in a contest since, but that was I think, the only ribbon I've ever won in my entire life was 2nd place for that. So that's how I got started. And then I didn't quilt again until at least I don't remember, until I was pregnant for my son. I was teaching 1st grade. 2nd at that time, teaching 2nd grade, and I had each one of the kids draw a picture of what they thought a baby would want to look at. And then they used fabric crayons, and they colored them, and I ironed them onto fabric and quilted around them and made a wall hanging over his crib.
Oh, that's so cool.
And then I did one for my daughter, and then I got pregnant for my 3rd, and he never got one. That was a long story, but he never got one. And so then I was quilting then, still sewing. I loved making clothing for, like, to wear to school, kind of like Miss Frizzle. Like, if we were doing mountains, I would have a dress made out of mountain fabric, that kind of stuff. So I enjoy doing that.
And how long did you teach?
Oh, 25 years.
Amazing.
Yeah, librarian, teacher, everything. Did admissions for a little while. But quilting really came about where I got hooked on the quilting bug, I guess. Probably about before Katrina. So everything is judged by that. But I think it was probably about 2 or 3 years before Katrina I started. And then I joined a guild, which really propels you into a different realm.
Yeah, tell me about your guild experience.
It's so much fun to be with people who love doing what you love doing. I'm not really a group kind of person. Like, I don't like to exercise in group. I don't normally like to do things groupy. I like to just do my thing up here in my sewing room. But being with people who love what you're doing and are so much better at it, and they share all their knowledge and they share everything with you. And if you're working on something and you say, I'm making an I Spy quilt, the next thing you know, you've got envelopes in your mailbox full of little pieces of fabric that they think you can use in your quilt. Or, I don't know. It's just quilters tend to be very giving. And I think that the whole idea of quilting and giving go together. Because when you make one, you want to give somebody warmth and comfort And so that's how my quilt guild is. They're very warm and giving and wanting to share their knowledge and share their things and share time together.
And what do you do in the guild? How often do you meet?
We meet. They're all probably listening, going,
Right.
"Wait a second, you haven't been in 2 months," and I'm missing this week too. We meet once a month on Wednesday nights, and we kind of consciously made it so that we could never be too big to meet at people's houses. We wanted to be able to meet at people's
that's
houses
nice.
instead of having to go to a hall or something.
So how many are in your guild, do you think?
Our cap is 15, and I think we're at 12 right now. And we try and make it so every time we meet, someone is assigned with teaching something. And it can be a binding method, which one of the girls did recently, and I came right home and put it on one of my quilts and loved it. Or it could be a new square pattern. Then they also do, usually every year we pick one thing that we do every month. So there was one, we did strips, 5.5-inch strips, and everybody shared strips and we choose a color. So like this month would be yellow, next month would be purple, the next month. And then people give us ideas, like what to do with strips. What do you do with 2.5-inch strips? What do you do with 5.5-inch strips? And so we get patterns to use. And a lot of them end up going into donation quilts or charity quilts. And that's another thing the guilds are real big into. Quilts of Valor, or we've got a group right now from a bigger guild that I belong to where we do sewing retreat. And one of the girls had breast cancer, and she started just giving out quilts to other cancer survivors or cancer patients to wear while they're getting their treatments and they're cold. And I mean, that has gone, that it's like gangbusters. They're just giving them out fast as they can get them. It's great. And from kids to adults, men and women, all people going through cancer treatments, and they give it to them. So guilds have a lot of different hats they wear, but giving would be the word I would use to describe my guild.
That's really interesting.
Yeah.
Do you think that means that there should be kind of a special, like I'm talking a little bit about copy right now. So one of the questions is, where do you get your patterns? Should you pay for your patterns? Is there a commercial aspect to a guild? Sort of how do we understand? Should there be a license? So how do you get tell me a little bit more about how you choose patterns and what your thoughts are.
Usually it's from online and not, now, and this, my guild is really, they don't give away, like if I buy a pattern for a purse and I bring the purse and I show everybody my quilted purse or bag, and then they write down what the pattern is and they buy it, because we feel like that's somebody's livelihood. You're taking, so if I were to make copies of that pattern and just hand it out, then that, and we're very conscious about that. Like it makes everybody very nervous to think that they've borrowed or taken something that.
Because why?
Because, like I said, somebody created that pattern. It's their mental knowledge, I guess is the way we look at it. And so if I take my $15 pattern and make copies of it for everybody, then even if I'm teaching it, I have everybody buys it. Mm-hmm. And then we all work from that same pattern. But then they own it too, and then they have it to use for future.
Right.
I don't know. It just, and I don't know if that's right or wrong, but the ones that we give out, like we'll make copies of, is a free, like Bonnie Hunter has a site where she does lots of scrappy things, and those are all free. And we know they're free, and so then making copies of it is not a big deal. But if somebody's paid for it, we definitely honor that it's been paid for. And so I don't know if it's right or wrong, but to us it feels right not to gyp the person out who came up with the idea.
Yeah. Now, what about the shop? So you guys have a lot of classes there. Same situation? Same
situation, right. What happens is if we want to teach something, a quilt, and it's a pattern, one we just did, it's called Esplanade. Anyway, they ordered several copies of this pattern, and then when you sign up, you got the pattern with the class. And so it would have been easy just to copy it. It was one little piece of paper, but somebody came up with it, and it seems a shame not to honor but I don't know if that's right or wrong. I'm not sure, but that's how we do it. And if it's a PDF pattern, when the person signs up, we put their email in and get it. Again, it's paid for through the class, but they get a PDF link to print it out themselves.
Are you able then, you buy them wholesale or you buy them?
That I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know how I think she gets it wholesale